Ibrahim Traoré's greatest weakness was his family, and his enemies knew it. Though he had faced coups, foreign sanctions, and assassination attempts, nothing could prepare him for what happened on that sweltering Tuesday afternoon. His 14-year-old sister, Aminata Traoré, vanished without a trace. She had simply been walking home from Imam Malik Middle School in Ouagadougou's safest district, 15 minutes from the presidential residence, protected by 2 undercover guards and watched by dozens of security cameras. At 3:30 p.m., Aminata walked through the school's front gate, the sun casting long shadows across the dusty red earth. Her school bag bounced gently against her back, her braid swaying as she laughed with her friend Fatima. "We'll have a math exam tomorrow," she said, clutching her textbook to her chest. "But don't worry, my brother will help me study like he always does." Fatima smiled and waved goodbye at the street corner. It was the last time anyone saw Aminata. By 4:45 p.m., panic had set in. Ibrahim Traoré, the president's mother, was pacing back and forth, clutching her phone with trembling hands. "She's never late," she whispered, her voice quivering. "She always calls. Her phone is off." When the call reached President Traoré, then in a classified meeting with his defense minister, he felt the air leave his lungs. The room seemed to shrink. Without another word, he stood and said coldly, "Call Mamadou, initiate emergency protocol, now." By 6:00 p.m., the search had begun, private, quiet, and ruthless. Within an hour, the team uncovered a chilling discovery. All surveillance cameras on Aminata's route had experienced a simultaneous failure starting at 3:25 p.m. Mamadou, head of presidential security, reviewed the blank feeds with a grim expression. "These weren't glitches," he said. The entire system was breached in a coordinated cyber attack, professional, military grade. Worse still, the 2 security agents assigned to discreetly follow Aminata were found unconscious in an alleyway. Blood tests would later reveal they had been drugged with a fast-acting neurotoxin that paralyzed within seconds. At that moment, Ibrahim Traoré knew. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a declaration of war. For 3 days, the entire presidential apparatus operated in silence. There was no public statement, no media leak. Internally, the security services scoured every inch of Ouagadougou. Interpol was covertly involved. French intelligence was informed, cautiously. Despite their involvement in regional security, Traoré no longer trusted them. No demands were made. No messages sent. It was as though Aminata had vanished from the surface of the earth. Traoré didn't sleep. His mind raced with possibilities. Human traffickers. A personal vendetta. Or something darker. Something systemic. He thought back to the decree he had signed just a month earlier. The nationalization of Burkina Faso's most profitable gold mines. Billions in profits redirected from foreign corporations to the country's own treasury. Western firms, particularly a French-Canadian conglomerate, had lobbied furiously to stop it. They failed. Or so he thought. On the 4th night, at exactly 10:30 a.m., his private satellite phone rang. The number was blocked. His heart pounded as he answered. "Yes," he said, his voice raw from days of silence. "Bonsoir." "Ibrahim," said a calm, cold voice on the other end. The speaker was male, fluent in French, European, but with no discernible accent. "I imagine you've had trouble sleeping." Traoré's entire body went still. "Who are you?" "That's not important," the voice replied. "What is important is your sister's safety." The president's knuckles whitened as he gripped the phone. "If you've harmed her, she's alive. For now. But that can change. We are not monsters, President. We are professionals. We have terms. Speak." "Very simple," the man said, with terrifying casualness. "You will publicly reverse the gold mine nationalization decree. You will restore all licenses to the previous corporations. In return, your sister walks free. You have 72 hours. And just like that, the line went dead. For a moment, Ibrahim stood frozen in the darkness, staring at the satellite phone as if it had transformed into a bomb. He understood exactly what this was now: economic warfare waged through terror. His country's sovereignty had threatened global financial interests, and now they were striking back in the most personal, cruel way imaginable. But Ibrahim Traoré was not a man who bent easily. He had risen through revolution, through the ashes of coups and betrayal. And now, as tears formed in his eyes, he made a decision. He would get his sister back, but he would not surrender his country's future. The war had just changed shape. A secret task force was assembled within the hour. Codenamed Resemblance, it was composed of Burkina Faso's most elite intelligence operatives, a handful of trusted foreign allies, and a cyber warfare team with access to global surveillance systems. Their goal: track the source of the call, follow the money, and find Aminata before the 72-hour deadline. Clues began to emerge. Encrypted satellite pings, facial recognition hits at a border checkpoint in Mauritania, a surveillance video fragment from a port in Algeciras, Spain, a young girl's silhouette matching Aminata's boarding a shipping container marked for Antwerp. Traoré followed the trail himself, flying under diplomatic pretense to Paris, then Brussels. Every second was agony. Every false lead a knife to the chest. In the meantime, disinformation was deployed. His government released a vague statement about enhanced security measures for national infrastructure. Foreign corporations received diplomatic pushback. The media buzzed with speculation, but nothing concrete emerged. On the sixth day, a breakthrough came. A contact in Brussels, formerly with French intelligence but now loyal to Traoré, intercepted chatter between private contractors linked to a multinational security firm with past contracts in West Africa. They had offloaded a sensitive asset in the Balkans. That same night, a girl matching Aminata's description was spotted in a Romanian transit hub. By morning, the operatives had located the compound. The rescue was swift, surgical, and brutal. Aminata was found sedated in a locked room beneath a dilapidated villa guarded by foreign mercenaries. 4 men were arrested. 1 was killed trying to flee. Aminata, though frightened and malnourished, was alive. When Ibrahim Traoré saw her again, he dropped to his knees and wept, holding her in his arms for what felt like eternity. But the story didn't end there. Traoré returned home changed, hardened. The war against neocolonialism had become deeply personal. In a public address, he condemned not only the criminals who took his sister, but the global interests who fund suffering and silence sovereignty. He revealed the attempt to blackmail his government, citing evidence gathered during the rescue mission. He named names: corporations, shell companies, and intelligence contractors with ties to former colonial powers. And he vowed never to reverse the nationalization decree. Instead, he expanded it. International backlash was swift, but it didn't matter. Traoré had crossed a line from which he could never return. But so had they. The world watched as a leader, once underestimated, emerged as a symbol of defiance, not just for Burkina Faso, but for a continent long exploited. And through it all, by his side once again, was the sister they tried to take from him. Cancel the uranium deal with China. Stop your revolutionary games with Africa's resources. The voice on the phone was surgical, precise, polished, inhuman. Ibrahim Traoré could hear no emotion, only the cold confidence of a man who had done this before, many times. Traoré's hand clenched around the device, the pressure so tight his knuckles whitened. "And if I refuse," he said, his voice low, controlled, but trembling with fury. There was a pause, a deliberate one. Then, the voice said, "Your sister will have a very successful career in Amsterdam. She's only 14, yes, but that makes her profile even more valuable in the circles we serve." A silence fell. The line didn't go dead. It lingered, letting those words burn. The president of Burkina Faso, the man who had stood up to foreign interests, nationalized mines, survived assassinations, felt his blood run cold for the first time in years. His breath stopped. His jaw tightened. He said nothing. "You have 72 hours." The voice said, "Think carefully." Then the line cut. No threats, no bargaining. Just a countdown and a child's life on the line. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the mahogany desk. For a long moment, Ibrahim Traoré simply sat there in silence, his elbows on the table, his head in his hands. The walls of the presidential office, lined with portraits of African heroes, felt smaller, darker. His body was still. His soul was not. He felt the unbearable weight of helplessness. The most powerful man in the country couldn't protect the one person who had always seen him as simply a brother. Not a revolutionary, not a president, just Ibrahim. But then, like embers flaring into a blaze, rage replaced sorrow. Not reckless rage, but something focused. Hot. Dangerous. No, he whispered. They think they've won. But this time I'm hunting them. That night, Traoré did not sleep. He summoned his most trusted allies for an emergency meeting at the secure underground war room beneath the presidential palace. Security Chief Mamadou, Intelligence Director Konat, and the most crucial person of all, Sarah Kamar, a 28-year-old cybersecurity prodigy who had trained at MIT before returning to Burkina Faso to serve her country. They think my weakness is my family. Traoré began, his eyes rimmed red, voice hoarse from days without rest. But they're wrong. By kidnapping my sister, they haven't just attacked me. They've declared war on Africa's children. Silence filled the room. Everyone understood. Sarah opened her laptop, screens lighting up as code flickered across her monitor. I've already begun analyzing the phone call, she said quickly. The voice was routed through 7 different proxy countries using the TAR network. But the origin ping came from Switzerland. Kone finished, nodding grimly. A financial fortress, where money hides behind numbered accounts, and where no African intelligence has reach. Sarah looked up. But there's more. The reference to Amsterdam. It was intentional. A breadcrumb trail. They want us looking there. But the infrastructure points to Zurich. These aren't random mercenaries. These are operatives. Paid, protected, and global. We'll have another problem, Mamadou added, sliding a dossier onto the table. Over the last 2 years, 73 young girls from Burkina Faso disappeared after receiving student visas for Europe. Most were between 14 and 16. None returned. No investigations followed up. Traoré slammed his fist on the table, rattling the laptops and coffee cups. This isn't about Aminata anymore, he growled. This is a trafficking pipeline, and we're going to tear it apart. On the 5th day, the world watched in disbelief. Presidents didn't do this. Heads of state didn't go public when their own families were targeted. Not unless it served a very specific agenda. But Traoré wasn't playing by the old rules. He went live on national television, unfiltered and unadvised. His image filled every screen across Burkina Faso and beyond. The eyes of Africa were watching. My dear citizens, he began, standing alone in the press chamber. Ibrahim Traoré speaks to you today not as president, but as a brother and as a son of this soil. He paused, letting the camera settle. For 5 days now, my 14-year-old sister, Aminata Traoré, has been missing, kidnapped by forces that believe they can control our politics through fear. They demand I cancel our uranium deal with China. They demand I reverse the nationalization of our resources. The room was silent. Journalists held their breath. But hear me now, and let this message echo across continents. Burkina Faso is not a colony. Not anymore. He stared into the camera, his voice rising. They took my sister because they thought this would weaken me. But in doing so, they've ignited something greater. This is not just a crime against my family. This is a crime against every African child exploited by foreign greed. Every girl trafficked. Every voice silenced. This isn't politics anymore, he said. This is war. The speech sent shockwaves. In Paris, officials scrambled to manage diplomatic fallout. In Brussels and Washington, intelligence agencies activated crisis teams. In Africa, millions shared his speech, fathers, mothers, students. Some wept. Others raged. Young Africans marched in the streets of Ouagadougou, Dakar, Nairobi, Bamako, shouting her name. Aminata! It was no longer about one girl. It had become a movement. That night, Traoré gave the order to begin Operation Dambe, named after the traditional West African form of boxing. Within 48 hours, they had leads. Interpol data, once off limits, suddenly surfaced from sympathetic agents in Eastern Europe. Sarah traced encrypted crypto transactions to a corporate shell account linked to a Swiss arms logistics firm, one that had formerly done business in Mali, Chad, and Burkina Faso. Satellite images revealed a suspicious compound outside Sofia, Bulgaria. A flight manifest from Geneva matched a suspected trafficker's alias who had entered Romania days earlier. The pieces were falling into place. Traoré's elite team moved fast, covertly, internationally, without permission. On day 7, a joint tactical unit raided the compound. Inside, they found 12 girls, drugged, chained, scared. Among them Aminata, she was alive. When her brother arrived unannounced, unguarded, and dropped to his knees beside her, she looked up and whispered, "You came." He held her tight and replied, "Always." The aftermath was historic. Interpol confirmed the arrests of 5 key operatives in what they called the largest anti-trafficking operation on African intelligence initiative in decades. European media scrambled to explain their government's failures. NGOs demanded answers. African nations, long fractured by external interests, found a rare moment of unity. And President Traoré, he didn't stop. The day after Aminata returned home, he signed a sweeping decree expelling every foreign mining company involved in shady dealings. He demanded restitution. He froze Swiss accounts connected to trafficking networks. He filed charges at the International Criminal Court, not as a victim, but as a sovereign voice for Africa's stolen daughters. And he made one final promise to his people. They tried to use our children as pawns, but we have turned our grief into fire. Let every trafficker, colonizer, and conspirator hear this: Africa is no longer begging at the table. We are flipping it over. And I'm going to make them pay for this. Those words echoed inside President Ibrahim Traoré's mind like a thunderclap. They weren't shouted. They were whispered with a calm so dangerous it could split mountains. He didn't scream. He didn't call for tanks. He didn't order bombers. No. His enemies had expected all of that. They wanted him to act irrationally, consumed by rage. They wanted a hot-headed military response, something that could be painted as aggression by Western media. They wanted him to make mistakes. Instead, he chose the one battlefield they could not hide from the truth. By going public, he turned the darkness into light. Traoré appeared live on national television, eyes steeled, voice steady. He spoke not with sorrow but with intent. The whole world was watching. In that moment, he didn't just speak for his sister Aminata. He spoke for millions of African children stolen, trafficked, erased. His words carried pain, but also a promise. No more secrets, no more silence. Within hours, a wave of support surged across Africa and beyond. The hashtag #FaceSaveAminata trended in over 40 countries. Africans in the diaspora rallied online and offline, demanding accountability. Protesters gathered in Nairobi, Accra, Johannesburg. Mothers wept, fathers clenched fists. The world, long indifferent, was now staring directly into the soul of a hidden global crisis. But behind the scenes, the real battle had only just begun. Sarah Kamar hadn't slept in 72 hours. The brilliant 28-year-old cyber intelligence officer sat surrounded by humming servers and blinking monitors in the secured basement of the Presidential Intelligence Center in Ouagadougou. Alongside her tech team, she was digging through layers of encrypted communications and financial records. "Sir," she said to Traoré, showing him the data. "We were wrong about Switzerland. That was a decoy, cleverly set up through several proxy layers. The real source of the signal is in Amsterdam, the city's red light district, specifically the Wales Quarter." She tapped on her keyboard, revealing high-resolution satellite imagery. "This building here, it appears abandoned from the outside, but it's actually part of a connected complex. Thermal imaging shows at least 40 to 50 people inside. The bottom floors are linked by underground corridors." Traoré's face hardened. "And security? Professional," she replied. "But they're not expecting us." No one thinks Burkina Faso, or any African country, would dare launch an operation in Amsterdam. A slow breath escaped the president's lungs. Then we'll rescue not just Aminata, but every girl they've taken. That evening, Traoré picked up his encrypted phone. He called Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo. "Brother," he said simply. "You have missing children cases too, don't you?" A pause. "I do," Akufo-Addo replied gravely. "What are you thinking?" "We're launching a covert mission in Amsterdam, not just to save Aminata, but for all of Africa's stolen children." Silence. "What do you need?" 6 men. "Your best. Quiet. Clean. Untraceable." "You'll have them." Similar calls followed, to the presidents of Mali and Senegal. Not one of them refused. This wasn't about politics anymore. This was about justice. About reclaiming African dignity from the shadows of global indifference. The operation began on the 6th night. It wasn't like a Hollywood movie. There were no explosions, no car chases. Just precision, silence, and resolve. 18 highly trained special forces soldiers from 4 different African nations entered Amsterdam as tourists. Business suits, shopping bags, no weapons in sight. Everything had been arranged in advance: safe houses, transport, contingency routes. Sarah Kamar's team had infiltrated the building's internal security system days earlier. They disabled surveillance, cut communications, and looped camera feeds. At 3:00 a.m. the command came in. Alpha Team, rear entrance secured. Bravo Team, side perimeter clear. Charlie Team, main target in sight. President Traoré sat in a secure communication room in Ouagadougou, heart-pounding, listening to every whispered update through an encrypted satellite feed. Entering target building now. 5 minutes of silence. Then, Alpha Team to center. First floor cleared. We've found 12 girls. Alive. Bravo Team to center. 8 more girls in the basement. Charlie Team. Charlie Team reporting. Aminata located. Alive. Physically unharmed. Traoré's breath caught. Tears welled in his eyes, unstoppable. His shoulders shook, but he didn't speak. He couldn't. The storm inside him had broken. But it wasn't over. Center to all teams. Sarah's voice came over the secure channel. "We've detained multiple local crime members, but the financial trails we've uncovered show involvement of higher-level actors, people with global reach." That morning, when the world awoke, everything had changed. 47 young girls were rescued from a hidden trafficking complex in Amsterdam. 23 human traffickers were captured alive, many of them with connections to elite business networks and political institutions. But what shocked the world the most were the documents Sarah's team had decrypted in the hours after the raid. Offshore bank accounts, email chains, flight logs, surveillance footage, all tied to a global trafficking syndicate operating under the guise of humanitarian NGOs and educational exchange programs. At the airport in Ouagadougou, a nation stood still. President Traoré stood on the tarmac as the military aircraft touched down. The hatch opened slowly, and Aminata emerged, eyes wide, lip trembling. She took one look at her brother and ran. They embraced tightly. "I was scared, big brother," she whispered. "But I knew you would come. You'll never be alone again," he said. Never. Around them, cameras clicked. Reporters shouted. But they heard nothing except each other's breath. The world was watching and weeping. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Traoré led a coalition of African nations to the United Nations, presenting irrefutable proof of complicity from banking institutions, security contractors, and even diplomatic cover used to move victims across borders. He called for the formation of a PAN, African Child Protection Force, a cyber intelligence network, and a continental DNA and missing persons database. For the first time, Africa was not begging the world to intervene. It was leading the charge against one of its deepest wounds. "What they did to us was unforgivable," Traoré said before the African Union Assembly. "But what we do now will define us. We were not born to be victims. We were born to fight." He stared into the camera one last time. If they come for our children again, they will not find fear. They will find fire. I didn't just rescue my sister, President Ibrahim Traoré said calmly into the sea of microphones, his hand wrapped tightly around Aminata's. I rescued 47 other children, each one stolen from their families, each one forgotten by a system that profits from their disappearance. And I showed the world that those who touch Africa's children will be held accountable. His voice didn't tremble. His grip never loosened. He held up a thick folder of documents. This is not just evidence. This is the architecture of a global crime. The names of companies who funded this. The banks that laundered the money. The syndicates that made sure these children vanished without a trace. We didn't just dismantle a building in Amsterdam. We've exposed the pipeline that stretches from Africa's poorest villages to Europe's wealthiest capitals. That moment sent shockwaves through Europe. Media networks scrambled to cover the story. Headlines ran non-stop: human trafficking ring uncovered. African operation shakes Europe. President of Burkina Faso accuses EU entities of complicity. In the Netherlands, where the operation took place, investigations into organized trafficking began immediately. Dutch ministers gave tense press conferences, carefully choosing their words, but it was already too late. The truth was out. In France and Belgium, internal resignations and parliamentary inquiries erupted as public outrage grew. Whispers turned into protests. What had once been dismissed as missing persons, or runaway children, were now seen in the harsh light of deliberate trafficking. But for Traoré, this was never just about Europe. We didn't just save children, he said again, days later, standing before the African Union summit. We made a declaration. They steal our children because they think they can steal everything else. Our minerals, our data, our silence. But they were wrong. They were so wrong. His words didn't just resonate, they ignited. What followed was unprecedented. The drafting and ratification of the African Child Protection Pact. In just 3 weeks, 32 African nations signed on. It wasn't just a treaty, it was a pledge. Intelligence sharing, border cooperation, and a unified digital database for missing minors. No longer would traffickers find Africa divided and asleep. This was a continent waking up. Meanwhile, Aminata, now safe at home, began adjusting to life again. At first, she was quiet, traumatized. But slowly she returned to school, played football with her friends in the street, laughed in the courtyard of her grandmother's home. And yet something had changed. She wasn't just another teenage girl anymore. She had become a living symbol of resistance, her story echoing from newsrooms to classrooms. Journalists came from all over to speak with her, and in one televised interview she said softly, "People call me the rescued girl. But I'm not just rescued. I'm protected, because my brother made all of Africa my family." 6 months after the Amsterdam operation, the government of Burkina Faso, supported by dozens of NGOs, launched the Aminata Foundation. Its mission was simple but ambitious: to find every missing African child and dismantle the systems that made their disappearance possible. Its digital tools used AI to scan darknet trafficking forums, international adoption registries, and unregulated clinics. The foundation trained rural communities to report early signs of trafficking. Its headquarters included child psychologists, cybersecurity experts, and investigative journalists. The entire continent rallied behind it. 54 African nations endorsed it, funding it with pooled resources and promising full cooperation with its investigations. A year passed. President Traoré addressed the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. This time, he didn't speak as the head of a small West African country. He stood as the voice of a united movement. "We are not here today to ask for sympathy," he began. "We are here to say clearly, those who touch our children will be held accountable. Africa will not be your hunting ground. Our children are not your profit margin." The hall was silent. Heads of state leaned forward. Ambassadors scribbled notes. The applause afterward was long and uncharacteristically emotional. Today, Aminata is 16. She studies mathematics with fierce dedication, dreaming of attending MIT and one day using her skills to fight trafficking with data and technology. She laughs more now, and her eyes are no longer haunted by shadows. But she knows who she is. She's not just a survivor. She's a beacon, a girl who emerged from darkness and decided to carry the light. Sometimes she speaks at conferences. In one recent speech to young African girls in Dakar, she said, "They tried to take me because they thought no one would come. They were wrong. My brother came. Then a continent came. And now, I'm here to tell you, we are never alone again." Traoré's enemies had believed they could break him by targeting what they assumed was his weakness, the love of a brother for his sister. But in doing so, they awakened something far more dangerous. They had stirred the core of African defiance, dignity, and love. They had reminded a father and a leader what he was really fighting for. And in that awakening, they unleashed a force that would ripple across the continent. This wasn't just about rescue. It was a reckoning. The kind that changes history not through speeches, but through the irreversible power of action. In that moment on the runway, when Traoré held his sister in his arms, the message was clear, not just to Africa, but to the entire world. We are watching. We are united, and we will never ever be silent again.